Right now, what I want you to do is kind of let go of the distractions of your life. We all have them. Let go of the things that you have planned, the things that are going through your mind about maybe the rest of the day, maybe the troubles that you are experiencing that you worry over, the things that go through your mind before you fall asleep at night. Let them go. We're here today to open our hearts to God. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes in life, we find ourselves returning to the same place over and over and over again, don't we? Or am I the only one? Sometimes it's because of a responsibility. I've got to go to work today. I've got to go to work and do all these things. People are counting on me. I have employees. I have this and that. And I got things to do. And I got to make a living and provide benefits and all these things. I have things I have to do. So you go back over and over and over again. Sometimes it's back repeatedly to our favorite lazy boy in front of the TV with our little nightstand and newspaper and, sometimes that's where we keep going back to. Other times, maybe it's something a little harsher, maybe a medical office. You go back repeatedly because you have to. I got to go back for these procedures or whatever. Or maybe it's a classroom setting. I go back to learn something. So, every week, several times a week or whatever, I go back to this place to learn something new. And you keep going back again to familiar places. So for some of you, maybe it's the pew you're sitting in. We all like to sit in the same place because it's comfortable. It's familiar. You guys have moved from there over to here because of the camera. I know, I get it. Thank you. Sometimes it might be to a place that's very difficult. Maybe it's to a place that oppresses you. We find ourselves repeatedly going back to a place like a liquor store. We find ourselves going back to a place where secret habits maybe are prevalent. Maybe we go back to a place looking for relief. We go back to a place repeatedly looking for some sense of normality. We go back and to a place that we just want relief, maybe from destructive emotions. We all fight these battles, friends. We all do. Whatever the season of our life is, whatever's going on, as we go back to these places repeatedly, many times it's for refuge. Many times it might be for peace or comfort. Or let's go a little deeper. Maybe we keep going back to a familiar place for forgiveness. Or maybe we keep going back to gain better understanding or just to experience when it comes to our relationship with God. Maybe it's to experience some sort of holiness, some sort of divinity, something about God that we yearn for. We're going to talk a little bit about Jesus. And Jesus was an absolute magnet for people because he engaged with people all the time. And many of the people he met, many of the people would go back and back and back. It created what I call a well-worn path. You keep going back to the same place for various different reasons. And many times people would return back to Jesus because of their doubt, because of their wonder or their questioning. Many times people would go back to Jesus because of the hardness of their own heart. They could not get it. They could not accept what he was saying to them. I mean, he was absolutely in opposition to the normal ways of life back then, in opposition to many of the traditional teachings of what we would call the church back then. Many times people would wear that path out, going back and forth to Jesus. What about you? Is there a pathway that your feet travel going back and forth to the feet of Jesus sometimes? Do you find that many times that that's where you find your solace? Is that where you find your answers? Is that where you find the things that you're looking for? Is that where you find sometimes the things that fill you while your human heart struggles to understand and to do things in a positive and in a good way? You know, if you find yourself going back and forth down that path to the feet of Jesus, you're in good company. You're in absolute good company. You're not alone. And like I said here, it's a well-worn path for many of us. Unfortunately, sometimes the path, and I'll be a witness to this one, is the path is worn because I try and do things on my own, and then I find out that that's not right. That doesn't work. And I go back to the feet of Jesus again and again and again. Now, I want you to remember, set aside the distractions of your life right now. The things that are worrisome or troublesome, or the things that are maybe even important. Set everything aside, because I'm going to ask you to place yourself within 3 different scenes that we're going to experience here today at the feet of Jesus. Today we're going to talk about a woman, and her name was Mary. It's not Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary was a sister of Martha, and she was the sister of a man by the name of Lazarus. A couple of people that we read about in the Gospels. And again, put yourself in each one of these situations. Okay? The first time that we read about, or we have an encounter with Mary, is in the Gospel of Luke. And if you want to look at it later on, it's out of the book of Luke, chapter 10, is where you'll find it. But our first glimpse of Mary is really at the feet of Jesus. But the situation, this theme I want you to go into here is that there's kind of a dinner party going on. And Jesus is visiting the home of Martha. And her sister, Mary, is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Picture this in your mind. Put yourself in that position. Jesus is visiting this home of Martha's. There's all kinds of people there. You know, there were probably some of the disciples. There were probably a lot of people that questioned who Jesus was. You know, is he really the real deal? You know, are we going to see miracles today? What's going to happen? I mean, they're curious. All kinds of people will be there. Probably some of the religious leaders too, and many doubters. And here's all this stuff going on. Martha is the host of this. And she's busy doing all this stuff, getting everything ready and making sure all the preparations are unfolding the way they're supposed to. And what happens? Her sister, Mary, is sitting down at the feet of Jesus, listening to him. Can you imagine what that must have been like? You see, in the culture back then, that would have been very disrespectful too. Mary would have been expected to help Martha with all of the preparations, all of the things that were taking place. She would have expected to be doing that along with her sister. But she wasn't. She was sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to his words, as Martha bustled around with all of the things that needed to be done. Now, Jesus was probably very tired from his travels. He'd probably been teaching and preaching along the way, walking the whole distance. And Martha at this point is overwhelmed. Have you ever hosted a party or something and been overwhelmed? Any of you? Yeah. It can be all-encompassing. It can be something that that's all you can focus on is what has to happen so that everything plays out the way it's supposed to be. Well, and there's your sister sitting at the feet of the person that we're hosting. doing nothing. So Martha's running all over the place. Mary is sitting at his feet. But Mary exemplifies something that I think we all need to learn, myself included. Stillness. Stillness before God. Stillness before the one that we call Lord and Savior. Setting aside all of the distractions, all of the busyness, all of the crap that gets in our way sometimes. Well, you can almost feel the tension in the room as you're sitting there as Mary. And Martha speaks up, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work? Tell her to help me. You know, there's this anger, this bitterness, this, what are you doing? Mary, do I have to go to Jesus and tell him to help you in order to get you to help me do all this stuff? How many times do we find ourselves in the same kind of situation? Maybe it's not hosting a dinner party or something. Maybe it's just in life in general. We find ourselves so distracted by all the stuff that's got to be done. And we can't get still. And I love Jesus' response, of course. Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. He corrects her, and he does it lovingly. You know, here we see that Mary's priority, she understands that the most important thing here is to be in the presence and the feet of Jesus, not all the other stuff. She realizes that that's what's important on this particular day. And to hear his voice, to sit at his feet, to learn from him, to open her own heart to whatever it is that he's teaching them that day. You know, in a world that is constantly clamoring for our attention, Mary shows us the value of stillness and listening, and how hard that can be sometimes. She exemplifies this truth that before we can serve God, before we can serve Christ, we first need to sit at his feet and learn. We first need to sit down, be quiet and still, and hear what he has to say. I want you to imagine a student. You know, a student goes into a classroom eager to learn and to listen and to learn about a particular topic and all. That student wouldn't go in there and start teaching the class, would they? No. They need to learn first. Before you can teach somebody something or do something, you need to know what it is you're going to do and how to do it and how it's to be done and all the instructions and everything that go with it. That's what Mary is doing here. She's listening to the one that she's devoting her life to. Mary embodies this aspect of listening in order to learn. You know, in the busyness of our own life, how many times do we find ourselves not doing that? All right, now I want you to put yourself in another situation where once again we're going to meet Mary. And we're going to see Mary again at the feet of Jesus. The second time we're going to meet Mary comes from the Gospel of John. And it comes out of the 11th chapter, if you want to check that out later. And once again, Mary is at the feet of Jesus. And her brother Lazarus now, who Jesus dearly loved, is dead. He's gone. And the family had been grieving for several days. Jesus had learned about Lazarus being ill to the point of death. And what did he do? Nothing. He stayed where he was. Can you imagine what must have been going through all of the people's minds and hearts that were involved in this scenario? Here's our teacher, the one that we're following, the one that we've seen do all these other miraculous things. And we know that this person that he dearly loves, Lazarus, is really, really sick. And we all would expect him to go running toward Lazarus. but he doesn't. Now, we don't really know all the whys. Was he doing other things, or were there some? We don't really know. All we know is that Jesus waited. But then we meet Mary again when Jesus arrives in Bethany, where Lazarus was. That's where they were living, in Bethany, where he died. And we see Mary for the second time as she comes running to Jesus when he comes into the town of Bethany, and she falls again at his feet. And Mary is grieving. Mary is beside herself. She's so torn. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Put yourself there. Can you imagine the emotions and the feelings that you must have had at that moment? When the one that you were learning about and trusting in, you believed had been sent by God, ignored this plight that his good friend and the person he dearly cared about, Lazarus, was in. So sick. So Mary comes and she falls at his feet again, and she says that. And in the scene itself, we see that Jesus is deeply moved because he wept. He cried. He was overcome with emotion himself. But then we know that what took place was finally Jesus and the crowd ended up going to the tomb, and we know about how long he'd been in there and all these things. And Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. From the dead. He basically proved to the world of his divinity that he is God, here in the form of God's Son. Mary comes to Jesus in her pain and in her sorrow. She comes to his feet in the midst of all of that. She doesn't hide her emotions. And she expresses herself to Jesus with these if-onlys. If only you had been here, Lord. If only this had took place. If only. How many times have we done that? How many times have I done it? God, if only you would do this. If only this had happened. I want you to picture a child, maybe one of your own kids, right? Gets stung by a bee when he's playing in the sandbox. What happens? He comes running to mom. Bee stung me and all that. The child doesn't just get stung by a bee and say, I'm going to man up and I'll be strong here, No. Comes running to mama. I'm hurt. This is exactly what Mary does with Jesus. She's decimated by the loss of her brother. And she comes to the feet of God. It's the same principle. Mary comes to Jesus with that same honesty of that little boy. When we face disappointment, when we face hardships, when we face trouble and pain and suffering and all, do we find ourselves at his feet also? Or do we tell ourselves that we need to man up or woman up, right? I can handle this. Or do we find the stillness before the feet of Jesus as a place of comfort and a place that we can trust in? You see, Jesus is teaching here at this moment, Mary as well as everybody else involved, as well as us today, that he's the one that can comfort. He is the one that can bring resolution. He heals us. He cares for us. He doesn't leave. He doesn't turn around and make excuses. He does what God does. And many times that's teaching in the midst of healing. Such a troublesome thing to think of. Teaching in the midst of healing. Now, we'll go into another scene I want you to put yourself in. Again, Jesus is at a little bit of a party, so to speak, a little bit of an opportunity to get together with people and to teach and to minister and to talk about the kingdom of God that's coming and so forth. This time we see Mary at the feet of Jesus, also in the Gospel of John, but it's only a few days before the Passover festival. And the scene is this: Jesus is reclining at the table, and Martha once again is serving. But where's Mary? Where is Mary? That's a good question. Leave her alone. She did this in preparation for my burial. Here I want you to see Mary's act was one of extravagant worship. Extravagance. She spared no expense. That perfume that she anointed him with, that was her 401. It was extremely valuable in that culture back then. It was actually used as a retirement income, if you would, because of its value. Where it came from and all that, we don't really know. But all we know is that Mary had this in her possession, and in this extravagant way, to honor God, to honor Jesus, she pours it on him and then wipes it off with her own hair. An extravagant, unbelievable worship and devotion. It foreshadows his death, of course, but it is without a doubt an act of love, an act of unbelievable love. And by doing this, she really declares that he is worthy of all. For them back then, for herself, and for us today. It was her way of expressing that. Mary shows us that the true cost of worship is very costly. It's not free. It costs you something. It costs you a lot in order to make God the center of your world, the center of your life. Every time Mary travels back to down that well-worn path, so to speak, to the feet of Jesus, we're all reminded that sitting in silence at his feet many times is the best place to be.